You're listening to the Electrocasts podcast. This is podcast number 22. In this installment of Electrocasts, we're speaking to the electronic duo Unknown Land, featuring Australian electronic and independent artist Rob Bryant, who also records under the name Bear Island, and Chilean singer-songwriter Lucia F3nix, who has released a number of recordings under her own name. Unknown Land are releasing their debut album in March of 2016. The album is called 33 Degrees and will be the focus of our music and conversation for this podcast. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for yet one more Electrocast. This is our second of 2016, and we are pleased to be talking with Lucia and Rob. Lucia and Rob are two who make up the duo Unknown Land, and we're going to be spending an hour or so chatting with them and listening to their music. They have an album coming out in March, so we're really pumped to hear all about that and kind of feature some tracks from that new album. So hello, Lucia and Rob. How are you guys doing?
Hi, hello. Very good.
Hey, great.
And you?
Great to be here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I think you guys are our first guests from South America and Australia. So we are branching out. That's fantastic.
We have finally made it beyond the United States and beyond Great Britain. We have done a lot of Brits, you know, which they are very active on Twitter, which is where we make most of our contacts with folks like you.
So guys, do you have a release date for the Unknown Land album?
No, we don't just yet, because we're just about to send it into mastering. We set ourselves a deadline to get it into mastering this month. And we just last night got a set of mixes that we both think are ready to go. So it's pretty exciting.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so we'll be in mastering this week with Studios 301 in Sydney, Steve Smart. And once we get that back, it's just a matter of, getting the final wheels in motion and getting it out there.
So you anticipate a March release, perhaps?
That's what we're anticipating, yeah.
Oh, super.
Fantastic. So where's your album going to be available, friends?
At the moment, we're looking at an independent release, so Bandcamp, and then through the outlets like iTunes, Google, Spotify. We are also talking, I'm not sure if we can talk about Lucia, but we have someone lined up in Europe for a possible distribution deal there. But that's still underway.
Nice. Great. That's good news. Fantastic.
So what's the title of your album? Is it like self-titled or?
33 Degrees is the name. Rob can explain better that thing for me.
It's going to be called 33 Degrees because that is the latitude that Sydney and San Diego are
you're
on.
both on exactly the same latitude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
33 degrees. East
I
and
picked
west.
that up from your notes.
Math is my thing, and I didn't even read the numbers. How can I miss that?
Yeah.
So how did you guys connect then? I mean, was this sort of like ESP, like extra sensory perception that you knew that you were on the same latitude, or?
No, it's funny. It's almost like that. I guess we were both, we both had independent releases out at roughly the same time. And we sort of connected through Twitter and Bandcamp, hearing each other's music. And I think we contacted, there was tweets back and forth around the same day, and I heard Lucia's stuff and I was just really interested in it. It really resonated with me, and we connected through Twitter, and it was clear fairly quickly that we had a lot in common, had a similar kind of outlook.
Yeah.
I think the first thing we did was a remix of Lucia's song Ashes.
Yes.
And that really kind of just blew us both away. It was just a real, it felt more like a collaboration than a remix. And I think even listening to that now, you can really hear the start of what's become Unknown Land in that remix.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that. When was that? I remember hearing it some months ago. But how long ago did you guys do that?
That was in March.
8 months.
March, May.
Yeah.
Oh, last March.
almost
a year ago.
May. Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
Yeah.
Lucia, can you talk a little bit about your background in music? Are you a trained singer? Are you musically trained?
At all. No, I was self-taught. Everything I do is for instinct, by instinct. So I just sing since I was a child. That was the thing that I wanted to do all the time. But I started singing in bands, and later I can understand. I could understand that I can sing what I want to sing. If I can have participation in the music. So I have to learn, and I buy a synthesizer. Everything was very smooth in that moment. But at some point I get a little obsessed by learning how to write songs and be a better musician. And I forgot to sing. So I left that for the end of the process. So when I met Rob, that circle was finished, and I could sing again and develop that in all the way that I always wanted.
Your voice is beautiful, Lucia.
Oh, thank you.
But you do very interesting things. I mean, you jump between octaves, not like suddenly, but you sort of glide your voice into another octave, in very subtle ways. So how did you develop that? Is that something that sort of happened to you, or is there a particular expression that you're trying to put forward with your voice?
No, I was thinking about that yesterday, how I became that style. But I grew up listening to Siouxsie and the Banshees. She was my idol. So, and then I grew up singing by men. All the music that I could have to sing was singed by men. So I think that let me express myself in a range. I cannot do if I sing music for women. So there is there is something that I always tell about myself, so that people can understand better why am I how I am. So I was born in a dictatorship. So I lived all my childhood and my adolescence in that period. So I have very limited information. I miss a lot of music that you always knew. So just in the 90s, I knew a lot of bands that are musicians that you already knew and enjoy when you were young. So I just sing whatever I could in that period. I expressed myself only in that way. I couldn't express in another way. It was a very cold and dark world.
Right.
So maybe that could give you some idea of my personal taste.
So, but also you're still processing your life through your voice. It's always underneath. In terms of like the internet, everybody in Chile and Argentina and everywhere, I guess now you're just in full connection with everything that's happening, right? But during the
coup.
with Allende,
Yeah.
you were completely closed off from any music. So what were you able to listen to at that time?
I have the rare opportunities to listen some music that a friend of a friend of a friend enters to the country in some cassettes. So I
smuggled in. We call that smuggled in.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. So I heard Six in the Banshees, Bauhaus, Depeche Mode. I am saying about Depeche Mode. And a lot of bands, the more dark wave post-punk bands, and I love them all. In here, the radios plays only pop songs. Very catchy and very empty. So I didn't like that song so much. But time to time we can hear some Depeche Mode and Duran Duran. Maybe, but not so much.
Yeah.
When you guys collaborate, how does that work exactly? What's your workflow? Do you come up with a musical idea and give it to Rob to enhance, or does he do that with you? Who writes a lot of the lyrics? I know that sometimes we imagine that the singer writes all the lyrics, but I know for a fact that is not necessarily true. How do you guys? What are the practicalities surrounding your contribution, your collaborations?
The both of us send the other some sketch idea, musical idea. My ideas always goes with vocals and lyrics. If we like the idea of the other, we develop that idea. And Rob always focus more in the producing the song, more complementing the music, and I focus in the vocals and the lyrics. So in that way, we divide the work.
When we're dealing with electronic music, a lot of composers and songwriters will flesh out a song on a guitar first and then bring it to the electronics to try to bring it into that realm, and not really worry as much about notes and chords as much as, how is the arrangement going to work out. How do you guys work with that, with your Unknown Land project, in terms of, Lucia gives you a musical idea, you have musical ideas. Do you write these in more of a traditional way first, or do you kind of compose from scratch with the electronics?
For me, that varies. In terms of my personal approach, sometimes I do work with guitar and start out with guitar, much like traditional songwriting, and then develop that in the door with sounds. And other times it'll start with sounds and ideas and sort of inspiration from the technology and synthesizers and that kind of genesis.
Yeah.
And I usually develop it up into a rough kind of song format.
So, Rob, you're not a singer, are you?
I am not. And I've tried. Believe me.
You sing in the bathroom?
I've got no talent.
You sing in the shower?
At all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because with the solo work, it would have been an advantage if I could maintain total control and sing as well, but it's not to be. My voice is not to be shared. I think it's fair to say we work in a sort of traditional pop song format,
right?
Which we both kind of like.
You mean verse chorus sort of?
Yeah. Yeah, a good 3.5 minute song.
Yeah.
I disagree.
There we go.
Jump in.
Nice. Let's hear the disagreement. I love it.
The structure of the songs of Rob are just some monsters. I think I have that work to pick up which is the chorus and which one is the verse on the middle. I think that is my talent, Rob. Tell them. Your songs are really weird sometimes.
But you,
I think-
while you guys maybe, have somewhat of a recognizable structure, you do unusual things. One of the unusual things you do is you take a vocal line or a vocal exhalation, and then the guitar blends in with that and goes on in some fantastical guitar land. How do you do that? That is so cool. Like, which song was that? Pulse. You do that in Pulse, and it just like gives me goosebumps. Is when the voice goes really long and into space, and it becomes the guitar, and that is just stunning. How do you do that?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
That's just
It's really beautiful.
that sort of feedback is.
We made it, Rob.
Case and I are the
Makes
few
my
people
day.
who will recognize that, by the way, probably.
Well, I'm infinitely jealous to be honest. But go ahead.
So I guess what I'm getting at with the 3.5 minute pop song is it's kind of there, but it's subverted. And I think that's the case with a lot of what we're doing and a lot of the influences we're taking, like the whole post-punk 4AD thing, Susie and the Banshees, Cocteau Twins, they're very of their time influences. And we're trying to kind of take those influences that are really close to both of us and subvert them a bit and bring them into something that's, new. I tend to produce really intuitively, and so when I'm working with Lucia's voice, it kind of the way it dovetails into guitars and the other sounds just kind of happens by magic.
It's like you're painting more with sound, right? There's these long strokes, these long brush strokes of sound. It's beautifully painterly to extend the voice into, a sustaining guitar, like seamlessly. It's just wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's exactly how I feel about it. I'm so glad that comes across like that.
In my case,
Precisely.
I see it in another way. We are struggling for 8 months to meet, to know each other with all our differences. I always try to complement the songs of Rob. I always try to have a conversation, to try to support and try to moving around his work. So I think that is the process, the intense process that we had to do to meet each other, that potentiate our music too. I think that is the thing that I always try to enhance the work of Rob, and he do the same thing with me.
Right.
So I think it's a matter
So
of
there's a sympathy.
communication.
There's a sympathy between the two of you.
Yeah.
But they,
That's absolutely true, and it's very true, particularly of the guitars and those sort of lead lines. Quite often, I'll be adding them after Lucia's done the vocals, and they are kind of a call and answer.
I think it's more respect than sympathy.
right.
The word, I believe.
Interesting.
But,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hook into the guitar. Jeff and I are both guitar players as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
No, I love the subject too.
it's good.
So, go on.
But one of the things is that I think the reason why we like guitar, why guitar is such a prominent instrument, is because it is like the human voice. It can do things that the human voice does. And I think if you see guitar players play, they always see them talk. You always see them move their mouths. So we're like telling a story with the guitar, and there are other instruments like that. But if you play like a wind instrument, you have the damn thing in your mouth. You can't, right? You can't say anything. So you see those people, you see them, kind of like, move their whole bodies. With a piano, you're also kind of stuck now, not with the keytar where you can move around, but With the piano, you're kind of stuck and your hands are, occupied. So there is something about the human voice and painting with the human voice, if you will, and painting with music, and to do the same thing with the guitar. And the guitar you can slide really nice, right? You don't need a wheel to do that. And with the voice, you can do the same thing. And Lucia, you do that so nicely, the sliding from one register to another, and it's almost unnoticeable. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, she's singing much higher now, and it is like you just lure us into that sort of unwittingly. So let's talk a little bit about pulse, because I really like pulse because it begins with this pulsing rhythm. So how did you go? How did you go about doing the lyrics for that? Were the lyrics later, or did you have those lyrics? Were the lyrics the inspiration for the song?
No, I do everything backwards. Rob sent that song, that original idea, and I love it so much. So I always I improvise over the song, always. And the lyrics are the last part for me. So I grabbed to that idea of the pulse, and I developed a metaphor of the pulse like my heartbeat. And in that same time I was writing, I always try to write. I write since I was a child. In that period I was writing about what I thought about my life, what was what I was going to live in this world. So in my culture, I think that in all the world, for a woman who dedicates her life to making music, you have to live giving up a lot of things, like raising a family or develop as a professional. I am an architect too by day. So I had to resign. I had to give up a lot of things. So I was wondering in that period, in that same day when Rob sent that song, what I was going to live in this world. What was my
your legacy,
my mark.
Your legacy, yeah.
Exact. So I thought about pulse like my heartbeat, and this sound like my voice. So I tried to give a positive turn to that sorrow and that pain, and grabbing the idea of immortality that we have as musicians through our voice, our guitars, and our sounds. So that is the main idea of pulse.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes that to me the track feels like a new wave fado. Are you familiar with the fado?
What is fado?
Fado is the Portuguese sort of heartache song. It's a traditional Portuguese style of singing. Your text and the way you sing it has sort of this maybe not just underlying pain, but longing for connection, which seems to be a theme in all of your lyrics and all of your collaboration. But the other thing that strikes me about pulse, that pulse is also a nice metaphor for how your process sort of goes back and forth between the two of you, almost like a heartbeat, like a pulse.
Look, it was really interesting with Pulse. The whole song that was built around that opening sound. And it was very simple. It's quite a minimalist idea. And Lucia loved it straight away. And when she came back with those lyrics that took the concept of the pulse, the sound of the pulse, and used it as a metaphor for, a reflection on mortality, I just thought that's one of those sublime moments. And it's there's moments like
Nice.
that dotted throughout our work where it just connects
So it elevates
on multiple levels.
It makes it meaningful. Makes it
Yeah.
meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was Pulse one of the first songs you guys wrote together?
No, that's quite recent.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I think Deep's another one we sent you. That's an early one.
All right. Hey, I think we should listen to Pulse. I think we've made people curious enough about it by now.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
speaking with Lucia and Rob. They together make up Unknown Land. Album coming out in March. We're very excited about that. And here on Electrocasts, we are happy to really it's a world premiere, isn't it? In a
Yeah.
way, a world premiere
sure is.
of what I think would be a fantastic single. This is called Pulse. Pulse here on Electrocasts.
Oh, this sound will be my legacy. I did all with love, and when this pulse ends, my passion still remains. All with love, and when this pulse ends, my passion still remains.
Lucia, I love that chorus, especially when you're kind of down in the lower register. It reminds me a little bit of Annie Lennox. Did her singing make an impact on you at all?
Not so much. I heard just a couple of songs of her. I love it, but really late in my life. So
yeah. She has a vocal range like you do.
Yeah.
You know, you can go very very low and what's the word for it? Kind of serious, and very high and serious.
oh, that's a big change.
Well, you can go high and girly, like sort of the poppy kind of thing. So another track you send us, and I don't know if this is a pattern, but the tracks that you send are all single word titles, and this one's called Deep, and again it begins with a pulsating rhythm that so, but it is not a drum, right? Your pulsating is more synthesizer based, right? Rob, can you talk a little bit about that, because you don't really use drums in that much of an obvious way to indicate the rhythm, like as in techno or as in EDM, right? It's the kick drum is the heart of the whole thing, right?
Well, I can let you in on the secret. The whole album pulses and kind of, it's like a living thing. It's like molten lava flowing, and it's that's definitely a feature of the music. In Deep, in particular, pretty much the whole song came pretty much complete from Lucia. So I was really had my producer's hat on that one. Just added a bit of guitar and tweaked it.
I hear a bit of orchestral maneuvers in the dark kind of influence in the beginning, especially with the keyboard arrangement. Their first couple albums, Dazzle Ships and Architecture Morality and things like that.
That is really hard because I only know one song of OMD.
Oh, do you really?
I don't know. I just did whatever I have in my mind in that moment.
Yeah.
It's just a coincidence, I think.
Architecture and Morality is one of my favorite albums, and particularly the opening track.
Yeah.
I just think that was years ahead of its time. That sounds fresh if you put it on today.
It does. It's fantastic.
What's it
stuff.
called again?
I can't remember off the top of my head. Is that what it is?
Is that the first track? I think so. But it's nothing like this song.
Right. I can hear a little bit of your industrial influences come out in the percussion.
Yeah. I love industrial music.
Yeah.
American industrial and EDM from Europe. I love that. I grew up listening to that music, Skinny Puppy, Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah. So, in the notes you send us, you say you have also an interest in sci-fi. And I read the notes after I'd listened to your tracks for a number of times. And my initial impression was that the song seemed to be depicting like people sort of in space in their own capsule and trying to, make an attempt to reach each other, but the capsules are just going to pass by and they're destined to miss each other. There seems to be something in your music about trying to connect, but not always quite make it. And this one in particular, in Deep.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but...
I don't know about Rob, but in my personal point of view, I grew up like a very lonely person. So maybe the theme of connecting is a constant issue for me. In my country, a whole generation was lost. They grew up repeating, memorizing, obeying, just obey. I tried to do the opposite. I tried to be very different and very unique. So in that process, I grew up like a really lonely person. So maybe the contact issue is a theme for me. I didn't notice that until now, but maybe that is a big point. And by the other hand, I am an architect, and the spatial subjects are really important for me. Maybe I unconsciously give that speciality.
Speciality.
To my vocals and my music. Maybe you notice that.
Well,
too.
Absolutely. I like all of the background vocals in Deep. They're all yours. They're not samples, right?
Yeah, this is my voice.
I mean, is that am I allowed to ask if they're samples or?
No, every
you're allowed to ask. And
okay, I hope you're
and
insulted.
I can tell you every vocal sound on the whole album is
fantastic.
You also use reverb very effectively. You know, you don't go over the top, because when you're building up voices, when you're multiplying Lucia's voice and you start to do too much reverb, it becomes very convoluted and difficult it just becomes a mess.
I mean, that's been a fine line, because we both enjoy that really strong reverb sound, which is kind of countered its trend at the moment. So technically, with the reverb, there's a few tricks. Limit the bandwidth of the reverb quite a lot. Quite often with the vocals, I'll use some sidechain compression against the reverb. So it, when Lucia is actually singing, it pushes it down the level a bit. And then when she releases it, comes up. And other than that, it's just watching all the levels pretty carefully and tweaking them.
So, yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
No,
Shall we hear
go
Deep?
Deep
Or
Six.
Case, did you want to talk about something else?
Scratch that.
We're here talking with Rob and Lucia from Unknown Land, and this is a track here on Electrocast called Deep.
So deep, so dark, I'm falling down. I'm tired, so tired. You don't see me. So deep, I'm falling down. So tired, so lost. You don't see me. I am falling. I'm tired, so tired. You don't see me. So deep, I'm falling down. So tired, so lost. You don't see me. I am falling. so
Now, Rob, as a fan of 4AD's catalog, probably all the way up through maybe the Pixies and then very spotty through the 90s, but the 80s were a heyday for me for 4AD. What does that music mean to you, and how did you get hooked on it, and how does that contribute to your aesthetic as a musician? I'm very curious that not only from something that would be very interesting to hear from you, but because, I'm kind of a 4AD fanboy myself, so, I'm always looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing Lucia and I have in common is we both have this period in the 80s where music was really important to us and kind of saved us from a dark place. And certainly for me in the 80s, Cocteau Twins, Susie and the Banshees, Joy Division, that whole genre of music was a hugely important part of my life. And Cocteau Twins in particular, This Mortal Coil, where mainly featuring Robin Guthrie and Elizabeth Fraser, that music just, it was like nothing else. And it's obviously part of my DNA, and it's part of sort of everything I'm trying to achieve now. I mean, I spent a lot of years on stage playing bass in like hardcore bands and things like that, so I veered away from it for a while, but now it's something an aesthetic I really like, want to return to and explore with sort of modern eyes. So I don't try and directly reference any of that, but it is part of my DNA, and it sort of manifests itself.
Yeah, your music doesn't sound like the early 80s, mid 80s 4AD releases, but and I think that might be the trick. I think that's maybe what we all not consciously try to achieve, but end up doing, is taking everything that we've loved so much and putting it through our own filters, and it comes out sounding different. Yeah. But still, we honor that music.
What I like about your music, Rob, is that there is enough space in there for me to fill in some of the things in my own mind. Yeah. I like that about music. I don't like music that is that doesn't leave any room, that you just have to go along for the ride. And also Unknown Land Project, there is enough space in there for my mind to, and for my musical experience to fit in there and to find my own place in your music. And that's both your Bear Island and Lucia F3nix. Yes, your Phoenix project. Yeah. You are very smart about not totally stuffing your compositions, but leaving space in there, and I personally really appreciate that.
Good. I think one of my other big influences is soundtrack music. I see cinema soundtracks and even TV. Some of the high budget stuff that's on TV now is almost like the new opera, where composers are being given this space to really try and express complicated ideas and emotions, and a lot of that resonates as well. So I try and bring some of that cinematic kind of feel into the work as well. Yeah. And I often think of the way the sort of retro influences are brought in as like remembering those styles in a dream, and sort of trying to present them as like as almost as if it's a literal representation of the memories rather than the actual music.
That happened to me too.
So one of the things, sorry, I like to change the subject to dancing. I'll tell you what, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s as a teenager and an early tween or 20-something. So things like R&B music, disco, funk, were my thing. So your third track that you sent us, Reaction, feels to me like a very danceable tune.
Yeah.
I really, I want to get up and move.
That's cool.
Do you have dancing in mind with your music?
No.
No.
Anything can happen.
I would definitely say that like the dance aspect of the music would be the least important factor for this album. It's definitely not about dance, but I think it is about rhythm, right? Would you agree, Lucia?
Totally.
And so the music, a lot of it is kind of beat driven. Definitely, Reaction is probably the closest we're getting to pop.
We want to move souls.
Yeah.
Right.
Very poetic.
I mean,
Leave it that way, please.
We'll talk later, Lucia. I got some writing assignments for you.
Okay. I will be happy.
Well, in this particular track, I think in all of your tracks you do a lot of vocal processing, but in this particular track you very clearly use doubling of voices, and there is some sort of a growly part happening, almost like you use a ring on one of the voices. What do you guys do with that? It's really cool.
A really cool experiment.
Yeah. Are you willing to reveal your secrets here?
Yeah, sure. It's look, I can tell you exactly what we use there. That's a pitch shifter. Oh, no, I can't tell you exactly what we use. It's in Guitar Rig.
Oh, okay.
Native Instruments Guitar Rig,
yes.
and it's either an octaver or a pitch shifter.
That's what ring modulation does also.
Yes.
It duplicates the pitch and sets it off to the left and right. Yeah.
We always wanted to do something with my voice because it's really low, and we wanted to do an octave below, so that sounds like a man voice.
Yes.
So Rob achieved that really good.
I think it works really well in that song because the chorus is kind of, so we got a bit of vocoder happening in the chorus that's making it kind of bright and shiny. And it sort of descends into that middle bit.
It's lovely. It's absolutely lovely.
Like there's this fall, and then you go into that like baritone.
Yeah.
It's just
So cool.
it's a big contrast.
Hey, Lucia, I want to see our flame, a reaction of the folly. Love it. What's going on there?
That was a word that I discovered back that day, and I love it. I never heard about that word. I wanted to use it. Folly. So the idea of that lyrics was a way to exalt people, to react, to get crazy in art and ideas and connect. I think that is the whole meaning. I use, I think Rob doesn't know about this, but he always tells me that I have to be more soft in my words. I always talk about death and something like that. And in this case, I thought about a mother martyr, like a kamikaze people, but exploding in some kind of positive energy, not negative.
Right.
So
that's
I
what
thought
ignite.
that was my image.
So that's what ignite.
Okay, gotcha.
The line that
Ignite.
says "ignite your life beyond yourself."
Yeah, that was the idea. Very dark, but very poetic.
So these three pieces together, we already talked a little bit about this theme of connecting, but if we take these, and we're going to be listening to Reaction in a little bit, but you gave us three pieces: pulse, deep, and reaction. Now, if you say that as one phrase, pulse, deep, reaction,
Whoa!
I think you got a whole new thing going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think from my point of view, the music I've always done I have a tendency to kind of over-intellectualize, and it tends to be thematically very kind of abstract. If I've ever tried to write lyrics, they sound like a philosophy essay. And one thing I've really found working with Lucia is she's the opposite. She writes straight from her heart and soul, and with passion about everything. And I definitely think in that term there's a connection there where we fire off each other, and I've got this kind of intellectual approach that's being given more sort of emotional kind of force by Lucia and this intensity that she brings. Yeah, I just kind of feel like that's where great art comes from, is where you can get someone expressing something with passion from their soul like that. And I think really creatively this has been one of the great experiences of my life, because I mean, I've worked in collaborations before in bands, but I've never been a real had a lot of creative input into that. And so the work I was doing as a solo work, it's like it was all mine, and I wanted control over every aspect. And I think Lucia as well, in her solo work, you felt like you wanted to maintain control. And so for us to collaborate together was a bit of a trust exercise. Yeah. And it's really worked out. It's creatively really worked really well together, and the product is kind of greater than the sum of its parts.
It's funny. One of the questions I wanted to ask you guys is, what do you get out of working with each other that you don't have in your Bear Island and Phoenix projects? But I think you've just explained it.
Yeah, I think that's it. In addition, I would say the Bear Island stuff is largely instrumental. And the human voice, I think, is something that in music, something that universally kind of people connect to. So it's a very different dimension for me to be able to work with that and work with Lucia's voice, which is very nuanced and delivers a lot of information in tone and timbre.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So, Lucia, who are you going to collaborate with next? I think Case is looking for something.
One of our prior guests, we tried to do a musical with us, but it hasn't happened so far. But you know, how about we listen to Reaction and then maybe talk a little bit about where you're going in the future, right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so thanks for sticking with us, everybody. This conversation is fascinating, and we're here with Unknown Land. Unknown Land is Lucia and Rob, and they have an album coming out in March, and we're going to hear the track called Reaction.
Start the blaze, let them all
Now, Unknown Land is a little less unknown, huh? I mean,
Yeah, thank you.
this is exactly why we do Electrocasts. We do this on our own time with our own money. We don't do it to gain any fame or anything. We just do it to be able to talk with people like you. It's just absolutely thrilling.
Right.
Yes.
And help promote your music,
Yeah.
too. I mean, we talk to independent musicians.
We are really thankful for that.
It's really cool.
You're the first one for us. This is our first step.
We'll make a banner on our website.
Yeah.
So what do you think you guys are going to do next? I mean, Rob, do you have a Bear Island project that's brewing after Unknown Land is released? Or Lucia, do you have something that you're working on too, where you're going next?
No.
I think we've hardly thought about anything like that. We've been completely had our heads in this project for about 8 months now.
Yeah.
And as I was saying, it's only last night we've just both listened to the tracks and gone, yep, I think this is it.
Yeah.
Sending them off to mastering.
Good.
But we're both keen to keep working together and keep working on this project.
Great.
So
I don't have any
I think-
creative desire to work in my project just yet. I am really happy with Unknown Land.
Well, you've set up a serious website for it. You have a SoundCloud. So, I mean, where can people go right now to listen to some of your tracks? So you have your own website. What else?
Well, we're on Twitter, SoundCloud, and the website is at UKLD.net. I'm just trying to remember. I think I've got an Unknown Land domain as well. I can't remember.
No, it's .net.
Is it unknownland.net, is it?
UK.
And then are you also on Bandcamp?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we've got the namespace reserved, but there's nothing there yet.
Right.
Okay. And then one more time, where your album is going to come out on self-released, right? At first?
Yes.
It'll be self-released, Bandcamp, iTunes, Spotify.
And then possibly in Europe.
Yeah.
And then possibly get some distribution in Europe. And we're sort of thinking through doing hard copy CDs as well.
Good.
And then the world tour.
Yeah, of course.
The world tour. Well, it would be great.
You're mean.
Yeah. Maybe they could do some U.S. and Canada dates with Meter Bridge with Jill and Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
that'd be
they are,
fantastic.
Their music has a slightly different bend, but it's a very similar situation, although they are husband and wife.
Yeah.
Or partners.
Oh.
Probably a better way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't have any problems with communication.
Well, so I don't know.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
I mean, that's an unknown. We didn't talk about that during our podcast with them.
I, for one, am so, after hearing these 3 tracks, I'm so psyched for this album. I really, I want to, and I know it's going to live up to every expectation that I have and everybody else does too.
Oh.
It's going to be amazing.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
That's really lovely to hear. Well, it's they're a good sample of what's to come, and there's a lot of variation.
And we're talking sometime in March, right? Not.
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
That's the plan.
So you'll keep everybody informed through Twitter and through your website. Okay.
We sure will. We're going to start lighting up the
And thank you
Twitter
so
sphere.
much, the two of you. Thank you so
Very
much
welcome.
for everything. Your interpretation and your invitation and your friendship. Thank you.
Oh, our pleasure.
It's been fantastic.
Good.
And it's been great for Lucia and I to have a chance to sort of talk as Unknown Land. And this is sort of the first time we've been able to do that.
Hey, thanks so much, guys, for being here. We've really enjoyed talking to you, everybody. Thank you for listening. We've been speaking with Unknown Land. That's Rob and Lucia. And we're going to fade out. We're going to ride out on another track from their new album. And this one's called Fade. Thank you so much, folks. Take care.